late summer evening in August 1991, the son of Arthur Thompson, the criminal godfather of Glasgow's East End, met a brutal end. Arthur Jr., better known as Fatboy, had been outside of Northside prison for only 6 hours on weekend parole. He'd just eaten a curry, shared a few laughs, and was only steps away from the safety of his family home when a 3-man hit squad struck. 3 shots at close range from a .22 pistol hit young Arthur. The first bullet shattered his cheek, the second tore through his ribs, puncturing a lung. The third struck him in the buttocks, a final act of humiliation. It's what they call a Glasgow send-off. Even when the target's already dead, it's not unusual for one last shot, fired low, to deliver a message. It's not just murder, it's an insult, and this one was aimed squarely at Fatboy's father. More than 300 witnesses, including Thompson himself, were called to give evidence at the trial. It lasted 54 days and cost £4.1 million. At the time, the longest and most expensive trial in Scottish legal history. In the grey streets of 1970s Glasgow, where razor gangs were legend and sectarian lines divided entire estates, a boy from Blackhill was learning the brutal language of survival. His name was Paul Ferris, and before long, it would strike fear and later fascination across the Scottish underworld. Paul John Ferris was born on the 10th of November 1963, the youngest of 6 in a mixed-faith household, Protestant father, Catholic mother, in one of Glasgow's most deprived and dangerous districts. Blackhill wasn't a place for the faint-hearted. Poverty, violence, and territorial warfare between rival families were part of the city's DNA. From an early age, Ferris was singled out by a local criminal clan, the Welsh family, who bullied and beat him. That humiliation festered into rage. It wasn't long before the boy who once ran from beatings began to plan revenge. According to Ferris himself, that's when the switch flipped, when fear turned to fury. Ferris's descent into the criminal underworld began in the 1970s, forged on the city's brutal streets where survival demanded more than strength. It demanded nerve. He quickly learned that a knife could turn the odds in your favour. In Glasgow, it wasn't just a weapon, it was the great equaliser. By his teens, Ferris already carried a reputation, sharp, unpredictable, and willing to do what others wouldn't. It wasn't long before his cold-blooded cruelty drew the attention of Glasgow's East End godfather, Arthur Thompson. His father had warned him to stay away from Thompson, but Ferris didn't listen. He thought he knew better. To many in Glasgow's East End, Arthur Thompson was untouchable, a man whose empire was built on intimidation, loan sharking, and control. Ferris quickly impressed the godfather, becoming Thompson's most feared enforcer. His work was simple: collect debts, inflict pain, and make sure no one ever challenged Thompson's rule. It didn't take long for Ferris to earn a name on the streets. Thompson's wee man, loyal, efficient, utterly ruthless. He handled shootings, stabbings, kneecappings, even scalpings with cold precision. Orders came to him like items on a shopping list. To Ferris, it was all just business. Born into violence, he'd learned early to cut emotion out of crime. That was the rule: business first, feelings nowhere in sight. His brutality made him infamous. They called him the wee man, Lucky, and sometimes the robot. Soon Paul Ferris became one of Scotland's most feared hitmen. At the time, Thompson and his son, Arthur Jr., better known as Fatboy, were making fortunes from heroin. One of their other trusted enforcers was Tam, the licensee McGrow, a man who'd soon become Ferris's greatest rival. McGraw had earned his nickname honestly. He had a gift for slipping through the cracks, dodging convictions, investigations, prosecutions. No matter how tight the net, McGraw always found a way out. He operated like a man above the law, licensed to commit crime. Despite his deep ties to organised crime, McGraw hadn't faced a serious conviction in over 20 years. But while the Thompson network was raking in money, beneath the surface, tensions were building. Ferris didn't like playing second fiddle, and the Thompsons didn't like anyone rising too high. Then, in the winter of 1984, everything changed. Ferris's work as Thompson's top enforcer had brought too much attention, the kind that didn't go unnoticed by police. Wanted in connection with a string of murders, the 21-year-old fled to the Thompsons' holiday home in Rosyth, seeking refuge. That night, as Ferris and his pregnant wife settled in, police helicopters filled the sky. Ferris was certain Fatboy had set him up. Inside the flat, officers found heroin, bundles of cash, and several weapons. From that night on, Ferris was done with the Thompsons. By the late 1980s, the relationship between Ferris and the Thompsons had fractured beyond repair. Ferris began to distance himself, and the whispers started: betrayal, ambition, revenge. 5 years later, someone made an attempt on the Godfather's life, and Arthur Thompson Sr. told police that Paul Ferris had tried several times to run him down with a car. For Ferris, it was the ultimate betrayal. He'd once respected the old man, but now saw him as a collaborator with the police. A year on, in 1991, Fatboy was out of prison on weekend release. Back at his father's headquarters, the Proven Mill Inn, he was boasting, waving a so-called hit list. Ferris's name sat forth from the top. Within hours, Fatboy was dead, laying bleeding on the pavement outside the Ponderosa, the family stronghold. The killing sent shockwaves through the city. The end of an era had begun, and before long, all eyes were on one man: Paul Ferris. Ferris was arrested and charged with attempting to murder Thompson Sr., with Fatboy's murder, and with a series of other offences: drug trafficking, firearms possession, and kneecapping among them. However, he denied having anything to do with the murder and claimed Fatboy had been shot by a hitman known only as The Apprentice, who, according to Ferris, had his own reasons for killing him. Nevertheless, Arthur Thompson Sr. swore vengeance. Glasgow descended into open gang warfare. Blood spilled. Retaliation came fast. On the day of Fatboy's funeral, while Ferris sat on remand, a grim discovery was made. A car was found outside a pub once owned by Bobby Glover. Inside were the bodies of Glover and Joe Hanlon, two of Ferris's closest friends. Their corpses had been dumped along the route of Fatboy's funeral procession. A message written in blood. Ferris, still locked up and awaiting trial for Fatboy's murder, could only watch from behind bars. Many believed the killings were payback, revenge designed to break him emotionally. Ferris later claimed that Tom the licensee McGraw had arranged the hit to win back favour with the Thompsons. According to whispers from the underworld, Glover and Hanlon's bodies were first laid out in a Glasgow pub for Arthur Thompson Sr. to see, before being dumped in the car. It was a symbolic act, a tribute to the Godfather. At the time, Ferris, Bobby and Joe were seen as the rising stars of Glasgow's underworld, ambitious, dangerous, and more than capable. They represented the next generation of gangland power. The murders of Bobby Glover and Joe Hanlon were never officially solved, but in Glasgow's criminal circles, few doubted who was behind it: Tam McGrow, the licensee. Arthur Thompson, however, never recovered from his son's death. 18 months later, he suffered a fatal heart attack. His funeral marked the end of an era. Gangsters from across Britain turned up to pay their respects to the old Godfather. But one face was missing: Paul Ferris, the man who had once been like a son to him. Fatboy's murder trial was the longest and most expensive in Scottish criminal history, a legal war waged under the glare of the media. Glasgow's underworld was laid bare: corruption, payoffs, betrayal, and vendetta. In 1992, after months of evidence and witnesses, Ferris was acquitted, a shocking outcome that made him a legend in the criminal underworld. The jury didn't believe the Crown's case, but the acquittal didn't end the bloodshed, and Ferris' freedom didn't last long. After his acquittal, Ferris tried to keep his head down, but the pull of the criminal world was magnetic. In 1998, he was caught again, this time in a massive operation involving MI5 and Special Branch, accused of conspiring to deal in firearms and explosives. The conviction landed him back in prison. The sum It was proof that Ferris was irredeemable, a career criminal trapped in the life he claimed to despise. To others, it was evidence of a man targeted by a system that wanted him behind bars at any cost. While Ferris stewed in prison, McGraw consolidated power, absorbing remnants of the Thompson Empire, seizing control of Glasgow's multi-million-pound drug empire. In Ferris' absence, McGraw had risen to become Scotland's richest and most powerful criminal. The stage was set for two sworn enemies to collide, Ferris versus McGraw. When Ferris was released in January 2022, Glasgow's underworld braced for war. On September 24, 2002, the first shot in their renewed feud was fired, metaphorically and literally. One of McGraw's most trusted henchmen was found fatally stabbed outside the Shieling Bar in Shettleston. The victim was Gordon Ross, a well-known enforcer, murdered in the middle of his own East End territory. The attack shocked even the hardened locals. The Gangland enforcer was stabbed to death by an assassin waiting for him outside a Glasgow pub. Billy McPhee was another of McGraw's enforcers, a hitman and close ally of Gordon Ross. The pair carried out countless jobs together. Known on the streets as Billy the Iceman McPhee, he earned a reputation as both a ruthless killer and a major player in the drug trade. By then, McPhee was widely believed to be one of McGraw's most trusted lieutenants. In 1998, McGraw and McPhee walked free from court after facing serious drug trafficking charges. The pair, along with Gordon Ross, had been accused of smuggling £260,000 worth of cannabis from Spain the previous year. But at the High Court in Edinburgh, the jury returned a verdict of not proven for McGraw and McPhee, and the judge ruled there was no evidence to convict Ross. Just days after Gordon Ross's funeral, the Iceman met a brutal end. He was watching an old firm match at a Brewers Fayre restaurant when a hooded figure walked calmly through the door, straight toward him, and attacked. In a packed family restaurant, McPhee was stabbed repeatedly, in the eyes and the throat. It was a savage, personal assault. He was rushed to hospital, but died soon after. Despite the crowd, few witnesses came forward. The CCTV was said to be broken, and sources claimed the killer scattered blood, hair, and other DNA around the scene to confuse investigators. The method, frenzied, deliberate, and fearless, bore the signature of one man. Within weeks, Mark Clinton, already linked to previous attacks on McGraw's crew, was charged with the murder. There were only 2 or 3 people in the whole city who'd have the nerve to do that, one insider remarked. Mark Clinton's trial began a year after Billy McPhee's murder. Under cross-examination, the eyewitness testimony collapsed. With no solid forensic evidence, the case fell apart, and Mark Clinton unexpectedly walked free. Not long after, 2 of McGraw's associates, John McCartney and Craig Devlin, were shot at the Royal Oak pub in Pollock. It's said that McGraw himself rushed them to hospital in his own car. It had all the hallmarks of a classic Glasgow gangland hit. A busy pub, Thursday afternoon, regulars having a quiet pint. The door swings open, nobody looks up. A man steps inside, hood up against the cold February air. He scans the room, spots his targets, and walks straight toward them. He knows they're wearing bulletproof vests, so he aims low. He shoots them in the legs, the thighs, the groin, then he fires again. Another Glasgow send-off. That's what they call a Glasgow send-off. Even when the victim's already dead, it's common to fire one last round, up the backside. It's not just a killing, it's an insult. As always, the pub was packed, but no one saw a thing. No witnesses, no statements. Nobody was there. Miraculously, both men survived, but within days, the Royal Oak, a known underworld hangout, went up in flames. Meanwhile, as others were knee-deep in the drug trade and violence, Ferris's attention was elsewhere, on something completely different. Prison had changed him, or so he said. Inside, Ferris began writing. With the help of journalist Reg McKay, he penned his first book, The Ferris Conspiracy. It was part confession, part defense, and part warning. It sold by the truckload. 2 more books followed, Vendetta and Villains, each peeling back another layer of the Glasgow underworld. Ferris's writing was raw, streetwise, and unflinchingly honest about the codes of violence he once lived by. He became a strange new hybrid, gangster turned storyteller. In 2013, his life hit the big screen in The Wee Man, starring Martin Compston as Ferris, a performance that blurred the line between myth and reality. For the first time, The Wee Man, who lived his life in the shadows, became a household name. Today, Ferris lives quietly back in Scotland after years in London. He says he has no fear for his safety. Most of the men who once wanted him dead are either retired or dead themselves. He's spoken publicly about the hardest fight of his life, staying legitimate. He's worked in private security, written books, and given talks about rehabilitation and choice. But the ghost of Glasgow's underworld never quite leaves him. He's been accused of glamorizing violence, even as he condemns it. He's been praised for surviving a system that devours its young, and he remains one of the few figures from that bloody chapter of Glasgow's history still standing. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.